Yeah, it's super complex. But what I've also said to a number of people, not even just clients, is being like, take the game out of dating.
Yes.
It's not a dating game.
No.
Being clear is kind. It is
Yes.
not a place that you're being a jerk or you're pushing people away or whatever it is. You're just saying, hey, this is what I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
And this is it. And when the other person gets to know that,
Yeah.
they actually know how to like operate in space with you.
Yeah.
Rather than this whole like, should I text? Should I not text? Am I calling too much? Should we
Yeah.
do this? Should we do that? Being like, okay, I want to call you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Or no, I don't want to go on a date with you, or I don't see this going anywhere.
Yeah.
Imagine if people just knew where you stood.
Welcome to the Relationship Psychologist Podcast.
Tune in every Thursday to learn with us as we interview experts.
And laugh with us as we banter about friendship.
And take action by implementing the tools and advice we provide to you each week to level up your personal relationships.
I'm Dana Mullen.
And I'm Alicia Hinger.
We are soul sisters, besties, and psychologists on a mission to change the culture of relationships.
Your journey to becoming more supported and connected starts
right now.
Ringing is real.
Right. Okay, welcome to our mini-series.
Hello.
Training therapists with Erin and Alicia. Should we call it that?
Sure.
Make
Sure.
up as we go.
Yes.
So we were talking yesterday about a couple you're working with and talking about secure functioning principles, and we thought this would be a good idea to talk about this on a podcast. Why not? Because I'm teaching you anyways, might as well talk about it and teach others at the same time.
Yeah. I think as I've like stepped into doing this full time in like a professional setting, there's been so many opportunities for me to learn more about relationships just in general, not even just couples, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
how it comes up in individual therapy and some of the things that we speak of. And that is our narrative that we give to clients so that they can kind of walk about the world with more clarity.
Yeah. Because relationships are everything.
Yes.
Right. We know from the research, it's the most important factor in longevity. We know all the stuff, like we know the research, but the principles that I teach as far as working with couples actually relates to, like you said, friendships, relationship with self, teams, coworkers. It's such a broad spectrum of, it's everywhere, relationships.
Yeah. And probably one of the most difficult things to learn, I think, as a human, like being in relationship just in general is hard.
It's hard because we're not skilled.
No.
Most of us, unfortunately, grew up in these perfect, Brady Bunch families where we're all attended to and attuned to. And so we grew up with deficits. And then we bring those deficits to our adult relationships and then wonder why things are not matching. We're not parenting, we want to parent. We're not, proximity with our partner that we want to do. We're not having a good coworker relationship, having a good relationship with our dogs. Like it's, it shows up in every area of life. And so it's my, as you know, my passion to teach and grow healthy, skillful relationships.
And no, I think the most interesting thing I've seen along the way is like those relational patterns.
Yes.
So like often you'll find when I bring a client in for the first time, we do their like genogram with all the funny symbols and the lines and all the things. And for us as clinicians, we're looking to see like, oh, like how is your relationship kind of formed and what's this blueprint that you get? Yeah. And then as you go into adult life and you have boyfriends or girlfriends or friends and they, fall apart or there's irritations or frustrations within your kind of relationships and how some of those things you were taught at a really young age without you even knowing. And for us, like it's fun for me to see is like how the patterns kind of unfold and then giving that highlight for people being like, oh,
look at this.
Yeah, it's not going to change. I feel like the last little bit, my slogan has been like to want different, do different.
Yeah.
So having to like actually look at the patterns and go, oh, what am I seeing?
Yeah.
And a lot of that is clarity, not only with the relationship patterns, but within yourself.
Absolutely. For sure. Starts with self. For sure.
100%.
For sure. But we learn self through the eyes of another.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so complex and so interconnected.
Yeah. And people feel so lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't know where to start or I don't know who I am. It's a lot, especially like new moms or when I'm working with athletes that are in retirement or maybe their career is coming to an end. Like, who am I?
Who am I now?
Yeah. What do I do now? And then it kind of looks and kind of trickles into all your relationships and being like, oh, I have no solid foundation.
Yeah.
And clarity of like, oh, this is what I stand for.
Yeah.
And we go into this like people pleasing thing. That's a big slogan right now. And then, trying to make sure that everyone is happy and I don't disappoint people and blah, 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 blah. And then we get
hard
stuck.
to a high achiever and just for this thing and forget about everything else. And it's a train wreck behind me. And there's 1,000 things. So you're going to hear flavors throughout this conversation. I think, so we have 15 principles of secure functioning that I've talked about with Dana in the previous podcast. But we can go through those, you and I, and I'll teach you some of the things I teach with couples so you can apply them to, like you said, teammates and all the other areas of life. But you can hear flavors of like our parts work and you can hear flavors of like, our assessment tools. And, so we're going to focus on these 15 principles for the next 15, mini session here. But if some of these concepts are new to you, go back and listen to previous podcasts on those other topics and we'll try to educate.
And you'll find too, and I even find when I listen to podcasts, like you can go back and listen to the same one like 15 times and you'll get something new every time.
Yeah.
So find yourself looking and going like, oh, there's this new perspective I can take, or maybe there's another nugget that I'll find.
Yeah.
Even if you're not in quote unquote a romantic relationship at this moment, this applies to all types of relationships, like we said, to your coach, to your mom, to your dad, to your friends, your dog.
Yeah. Self.
Yes,
Even
100%.
Self. Even self. Because think about what we talked about last night. You talked about your couple and you asked the person, what do you stand for in a relationship, which is what I call a deal breaker. But even having that with yourself, like, what do you stand for?
Yeah.
Like, well, this with our clients all the time. Like, what do you value? What's important to you? What are your principles? Where does your integrity lie? And if you're going to waffle and waver on those things, what do you actually stand for? There's no safety in that. There's no safety in standing for nothing.
Yeah.
You have to stand for something.
Yeah. And I often have conversations around, and this is probably a whole other gamut of a conversation, but the idea of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're in relationship with someone, like I have to be so vulnerable with them. And there's all these places that you try and show up for, and then it feels sticky and prickly because it doesn't feel genuine.
Yeah.
Because you're digging at something that might not feel even remotely comfortable for you.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times when I'm working with clients, it's going, how present, instead of being vulnerable, how present can you be just with yourself before you can go and give that to someone else? If you're only giving yourself 40 or 50% of just being where your feet are, how can you have expectation you can do that with someone in your next closest kind of reach?
Yeah.
So I think that's, again, what do you stand for? That's your values, your core beliefs, kind of digging into that dirty crevices and creases to understand like, oh, this is what I'm rooted in.
Yeah.
And when I get frustrated or irritated, or I get all those sensations in my body that go, that feels gross.
Yeah.
What is that button? What's that button that's getting pushed?
Yeah.
And the more clarity we have.
That's brilliant. That actually leads to the first principle. So the very first principle of STAND, principles of secure function, is you protect the safety and security of the relationship at all times. And so if you're thinking about what you just said about self, is I don't have to be fully, I don't have to like give you the kitchen sink, while we're dating, for example, or, early on. I'm learning through time and space, but I'm fully present to the safety and security of self, of my relationship with myself. So I'm noticing in real time what's happening as I'm interacting with you, with the environment. I'm noticing what buttons, like you said, are being pushed, those crevices being pushed. I'm noticing what values are being, misaligned. I'm noticing those things, which is why dating is so important, actually.
Yes.
Dating and vetting are so important, because a lot of these things we're going to talk about in secure functioning, you vet out in the dating process. You're like, ooh, that value that we just clashed on, that's a core value of mine. This is not going to match. Okay. Right. Or those things are deal breakers, which aren't always static. They can be dynamic in nature for sure, but I'm going to vet these things and learn these things about you early on. And then as we go through relationship, time and space, knowing what's important to you. Again, I'm not going to say these are all written in stone. Like, I'm not going to say that my values that I had when I was married, 20 years ago, or, 22 years ago are the same. Some of the core ones are for sure the same, but some of them have adapted and grown and changed and flexed over the years because we change and grow. Like my opinion last year to my opinion this year.
100%.
Change and grow.
As we evolve.
Updating those maps, like updating this idea of who you are, what you value, and then that you said paying close attention. If you learn nothing else from today's podcast, if you just take that piece away from it, of paying attention, we call that attunement in the professional world. Paying close attention to self, of what's being triggered, what's coming up in my system, what's that crevice that's being right. What does that mean? I don't have to share that with you right this second. Or I can, if we're in a situation where we're safe and secure, I've created that environment with you, I can say, hey, this is what's happening, right? Because I'm going to notice it in many ways. Right? If we're close enough, I'm going to be like, oh, what just went in your body? And if I don't say it, I'm like, that's fine. Now we've got a wall. Right? So there's all this navigating of like noticing this thing, and then how do I articulate that in a skillful way so that you can receive what I'm saying in this continuum we call our relationship. Yeah. So it's complex stuff.
Yeah, it's super complex. But what I've also said to a number of people, not even just clients, is being like, take the game out of dating.
Yes.
It's not a dating game.
No.
Being clear is kind.
Yes.
It is not a place that you're being a jerk or you're pushing people away or whatever it is. You're just saying, hey, this is what I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
And this is it. And when the other person gets to know that, they actually know how to like operate in space with you.
Yeah.
Rather than this whole like, should I text? Should I not text? Am I calling too much? Should we do this? Should we do that? Being like, okay, I want to call you. Yeah. Okay, great. Or no, I don't want to go on a date with you, or I don't see this going anywhere.
Yeah.
Imagine if people just knew where you stood.
Yeah, right? Just know where you stand.
Yes.
Because you know yourself first. You're not waffling in your own
100%.
stuff. You're like, I know my morals. I know my values. I know what I want. I've got clarity about that. And yeah, not strict, black and whites here, but having some, we all have some criteria of what we're going to pick people that align with our values for the most part.
Yes.
And we kind of got to know what those are to be able to align then, to be like, okay, I appreciate and I accept that you value this different thing that I don't value, right? I appreciate and accept that you don't want kids and I do. Yeah. Right. I might really love you, think you're really great, but that's for me a deal breaker.
Yes. And then also knowing too, when we talk about values, that like there's more to it.
Yes.
right? So like you can have two people in the room that say respect is a top value of mine.
Yeah.
But what does it
that
look
mean?
like?
Yeah. Yes.
What does it look like? We can have the Pope sitting in here and then someone who just spent, 12 years in federal prison.
Yeah.
Respect is going to look completely different.
Yeah.
So getting really clear on what does that feel like
Yeah.
when I get disrespected, because that's usually a place we can land further.
Yeah.
Right. When I feel like gross about something, I'll
Yeah.
remember what that feels like.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, that felt gross.
Yeah.
Why did that feel disrespectful? That
Yeah.
might not land for someone else.
Yeah.
They might go,
What's on my body?
okay,
Where's
totally.
that line? Yeah. What are my stories about that? What are my beliefs about that? What are my values that's hanging up again? So having this like inner dialogue space to go, oh, it was this stuff. And then
Yes.
again, to articulate that to you and be like, maybe give me a second, let me just process this and then I can come back to you, in 5 minutes, be like, hey, that thing that I felt, not projecting onto you, I'm just telling you my experience. This is my experience, my perspective from where I'm sitting, my worldview of this
Yes.
event that just happened.
And also knowing that I don't know is actually an answer sometimes.
Yeah.
Like if you don't know, if you ask me, what does respect feel to you? Or what does that look like? What's that value? And I went, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Wouldn't it be better if I just said, I don't know, and
Yeah.
I have to take some time to reflect on that,
Yeah.
or let me go find the answer for you
Yeah.
instead of bullshitting my way and not giving you something that's genuine or present or quote unquote, what's been labeled vulnerable.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
That word has got such a interesting,
it drives me crazy. And it's the same, and I'm guilty for it too, is that the word of like authenticity, vulnerability, whereas like authenticity will shift and change based on who I'm with.
Yeah.
Me being a vulnerable person or authentic doesn't mean that, with my boss and supervisor, I'm just like raw and open. And I do the same thing with the grocery clerk.
Yeah.
There's like, I talk often about like a diagram. It's like I'm in and you talk about the couple bubble and we actually have our own bubble.
Yeah.
So in my bubble, if I was, which is probably never really attainable, 100% present or quote unquote vulnerable with myself. Yeah. What's the next reach? So I go to the next ring. That's a person that's a little bit farther away.
Yeah.
But I give them lots, but not as much as I would give myself.
Yeah. Because I'm present here first.
Yes.
So that's your wife or your partner or your best friend, or that's the person, right? Maybe that's God for you.
Yes.
Maybe that's a core thing. There's everyone's like, dartboard diagram, whatever, looks a little bit different.
100%. And knowing that like not everybody has to be in the same ring.
Yeah.
If you have so many people in one ring, that's life sucking.
Yeah.
It takes the air out of the room and out of your bubble.
Yeah.
So how, again, going back to the principle, how do you keep that safe?
Yeah.
Safety and security within my own bubble.
Yeah.
So that I actually can give to other people.
Yeah.
And I don't have this like, and I remember sitting in a session with you, this like safety valve.
Yeah.
That people are sucking out of and you not even knowing.
Yeah.
And that's where you find, compassion fatigue, burnout, right? You get into coping strategy. Yes.
Those, classic words we hear all over the social media these days.
100%. Yeah. And if you are at 30% of that presence within yourself, letting people know.
Yeah.
Right? Like, hey, I'm not there.
Yeah.
Especially in a partnership.
Yeah.
Often, right? You're like, oh, hey, I'm at 20%.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
No worries. At least I know.
Yeah.
Again,
I'm not going to ask you a deep question. I'm not going to ask you some deep question. Well, where we're at right this second. I pause and go, okay, we're in for dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Yeah. Right. I think there's this idea that in dating or within relationship, you have to show up in a particular way.
Yeah.
Because we have this fear of not being liked or being rejected or all those types of things.
Yeah.
And reality is like, if I was really present in myself and someone didn't align with me, it would say, hey, this doesn't work for me. And that actually would be okay.
Yeah.
Because I know it takes away from my air of my little bubble.
You'd be grateful.
Yes.
Yeah, you'd be grateful. People coming out of your lives for that reason to teach us. Hopefully we can learn and grow from that of like what aligns with us. Yeah. So I'd say the first, idea of safe and secure, like to create the idea of like we protect the safety and security at all costs. If I think about relationship with self first, and this is again kind of we sound a little bit complex, but I think of like really knowing, the metaphor or the visual of a tree. So knowing what roots you, like knowing the foundations of your roots that land you, grow you, ground you to the earth. Yeah. So what does feel safe and secure for you? Who and what do you trust? With who and what can you be your authentic self? So again, maybe that's your God, maybe that's nature, maybe that's meditation, maybe there's 1,000 things for that. Knowing where you feel like you belong. And not fitting in.
Yes.
Opposite of fitting in. Actually
100%.
Belonging. Knowing, who, if there's a who in the world, deeply knows you, like to the core. That's got to be you first. Like, can you pause and reflect and go, I know what this is. I know when I have this feeling, or I have that look, or I have this twinge in my body, I pause and go, I'm unpacking what that really is happening in my body, where that comes from.
Yeah.
So I know those stories back to, oh, when this happens, that feels like this, or it reminds me, and again, it's not content, it reminds me of this feeling I had this one time, and I know what that is. So it's being deeply present and slowing down and be like, when this gets triggered here, I hear that younger part of me, because it's all younger parts.
Yes.
It's not here
100%.
now today parts. I hear that younger part, and she has this opinion or this fear, this, again, from that narrow perspective of that point of view. And I go, okay, I hear you. It's not necessarily accurate, but I make space for her and I expand into that space and go, okay. And then that shows up without, if I don't attend to her, it shows up like high achiever. It shows up like a pleaser. It shows up like anger, whatever. It shows up in the world like these actions or these parts of myself. But really, if I link it back to the core of what's really happening, then what shows up is more skillful.
Right. And I think reminding to you, and often, and I've seen you do it in sessions, and I also have done it now with my own clients, of being like, there's nothing to change or fix.
No.
Just to notice.
Just awareness.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
That when you have these parts show up being like, oh, that feels funny.
Yeah.
Right. Or like, oh, what's happening here?
Yeah.
I don't need to change her.
No.
I can notice
listen
her.
to her.
Yes. Just like give her a voice for a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't become her.
Yeah.
So it's not this like this
Yeah.
part that shows up. It's like, who I'm feeling, you know, the big umbrella word that I wish I could throw out to you is anxious. Oh, I feel anxious.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on, little one. What's happening?
Yeah.
And maybe it's not what's happening. It's just going, hey, let's settle you down a little bit.
Yeah. I got
That's
you.
just, yes, that's your little nervous system.
Yeah.
Which is the same from when we were little to now.
Yeah.
We're just bigger.
Yeah.
Right.
More data.
Yes. Right. So we have so much more that goes into the system. That's
Yeah.
like, hey, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Let's get through what we're getting through. And
Yeah.
I'm just going to give you a second.
Yeah. Which is really great because if you think about it, when if you use anxiety as the example, if we're really in a threat mode, so anxiety is obviously a assessment threat. We know
Yes.
this, right? And so if we're really in a threat mode, we can't really think about that. If a lion comes in this door, somebody with a gun comes in the door right now, we're doing this podcast, we're going to be in instant fight or flight response. And we're going to be hijacked by our amygdala system, right? All the
Mhm.
like it's going to, right? All the whole system is going to kick into gear. We're not going to be thinking about what to do next. We're going to be reacting. So
Right.
if we can pause and think about it or talk about it, we're not in that fight or flight. So what you're saying is exactly bang on to be like, hey, little one, if I can say that, hey, little one, what do you need? Or hey, little, I see you. That recognition of like, oh, I can ask those questions. I can be present to that means I'm not actually under the threat that it thinks it's under. So that part, the amygdala, or that, whatever, I call mine Amy, whatever, my Amy thinks she's under a threat, right? Not my
Yeah.
creative amygdala, Amy. And it's more, it's more than just her, but that part of me, when she freaks out, she's like, oh my God, I'm like, hey, I got you. Hey, Amy, what's going on? And if I can even pause and have that second of like, I recognize her, I'm not in threat the way she thinks I am.
Mhm.
That's it. That's a simple reminder that she thinks we're going to die.
Yes.
And actually, if I recognize that she thinks that, I don't think that. So I'm going to
Yes.
step back and be that observer mind of like, what can I do for you right now? And I'm not going to devalidate and devalidate her, whatever that word is, her experience, right? I don't know if that's a good word, making it up, words here.
Go for it.
Misvalidate. So if she says, but that thing or that dog or that, right, your son's going to be sick and having bad dreams about like having a baby, right? I'm like, okay, I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. So I validate that experience that part of me is having this like meltdown for this thing. Okay. Because probably what she's rooted in is my values, my integrity, my truth, my right,
Mhm.
not factual, but parts of that. And I lean back and go, okay, so what's the most loving thing I can do for her right now? Maybe it's just bringing her to the present moment, being like, I hear you. And just right now, feel this blanket. See these dogs on the floor. Just right
Mhm.
now, bring that fearful part of me to this present moment in time so I can like resonate and expand and give her space. And then I can then go, okay, do you feel a little better? Now I'm going to take action. Just even that pause of like, let me bring you to the here and now where that's not happening currently. Your fears probably are valid.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but whatever. I'm going to validate you anyways. And it's not happening in this second in time.
Yeah.
Because if it was happening, I wouldn't be able to talk to you about it.
Right.
I'd be having a reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're running around with that
you.
part of you.
Totally. I'd be hijacked.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
I call that like moment of hesitation is like minding the gap.
Yeah.
So that little moment in time where it's like little one is starting to like come up and you're starting to feel this like, and then that moment where you just breathe.
Yeah.
And it could be 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But that moment of hesitation is
Huge.
that gap that you can mind, or minding the gap.
Yeah.
It says, hey, how can I bring that nervous system down? Even if it's at a 10, how do you bring it to a 9.5?
Yeah.
So that you have just a little bit of space to just take some intel.
Just separate
Yes.
from her. Yeah.
Right. An example I give lots is like if you, particularly parents. It's like, oh, your little one is scared that there's monsters under her bed and she won't go to sleep and she's screaming and yelling and she's freaking out. And so would you go to the door, open it and go back to sleep?
Yeah.
You're being an idiot,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Or would you go in and go, oh my God, there's monsters?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Most often, if a parent is attuned or has like the kind bones of maternal instincts in their body, will go in and go, oh, little one, I'm so sorry. Should we check under the bed?
Yeah.
You know, let me show you in the closet.
Come here, let me hug you first.
Yeah, you know, give you some like
safety first.
Yeah, this
Here
little
now,
like
you're safe. Even if they're there, I got you.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that there's no such thing as monsters because that little brain of hers is going, there absolutely
Now I don't believe
is.
you. Now I don't believe me. Now we're just going to disconnect.
Yes, one of the best slogans I think anyone could say, not only to people around them but to themselves, is "I believe you."
Oh, huge. Yeah.
Massive, and just letting it be there.
Yeah. Which I hear this in my office. Couples get mad about that because I'm like, when you say I believe you, then they're like, I don't want to validate her delusions or his delusions. I'm like, that's not what you're doing. You're valuing that that's their experience.
Yes.
Even if their experience you don't agree with, which you might not, and you probably won't. That's totally okay. I validate that you're afraid of monsters.
Yeah.
I might think there's no monsters. I might tell you there's no such thing as monsters in my mind. I'm going to validate that that's your experience.
Yeah.
Like,
And I remember watching you with a couple being like, there's no such thing as reality.
It's true.
Because you guys will just, the two people in this relationship are just going to fight about their own truths, in which you and I can go watch the same movie.
Yeah.
What you take away from it will be completely different than I will, whether you like it or not, or whether you saw bright colors or didn't.
Yeah.
Right. Like our perception is skewed based on how we see it through the lenses of the world that we have.
Exactly.
So stop fighting over something you'll never get to the bottom of.
Yeah. Which is a really great rule. Talk about the, first principle of safety and security. Create some agreements in your relationship that I want you to reflect on a regular basis. Like I don't want you to create rules and leave them alone. And that's forever. That's not how we do rules. We create rules, agreements for now, and then we keep looking at those. Are those working for us still? Are those still? And it could be like once a week. Eventually, it could be once every 6 months. Eventually, now I kind of do mine like every year. Like how are those rules, agreements sitting for us? So agreement of like, let's not fight about content.
Yeah.
Let's not get stuck in the reciprocal fighting. That open door, closed door, that same roundabout thing. Around the merry-go-round of the content. I go, okay, well, from your point of view, that's how you experience it. I have a different point of view, clearly, but I believe that that's your experience. Because if I actually dig behind that experience, there's something else going on. So get out of content. Again, that's a really great rule. Get out of content, get into what's happening for my partner behind that. Yeah. And then behind that and behind that.
100%. And then going back to self, being like, oh, when I get really stuck on particular things, or maybe that, for me, if I get a tightness in the chest and like a little bit burning sensation in my throat, like, oh, I'm actually not being heard, or maybe I'm scared of saying something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So it's like, oh man, okay. It actually has nothing to do that, my wife didn't flip the laundry or empty the dishwasher or X, Y, or Z. It has actually a lot to do with, hey, I asked for help, or maybe I didn't articulate it well and I didn't feel heard, or maybe I'm scared to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And imagine going to your partner and being like, I'm having a little bit of fear of saying something to you.
Yeah. And instead of like, what do you mean? I'm not scary.
I'm
like, oh, okay, I believe you.
It's a leaning into
about that.
Yes. And leaning into be like curious.
Yeah.
Just be curious, not only with yourself, but with the people around you.
Absolutely. Like, around you.
One, why am I surrounded with the certain people I do have? Because
Yeah.
you will kind of, again, you'll track where you're kind of flowing into, where are your values and how are they sitting?
Yeah.
Whether you believe in God or if it's universe or Buddha or a dog.
It's just energy.
Totally.
We vibrate a certain vibration and we bring in that vibration.
Yes.
That's the laws.
And that energy will give you kind of, whether it's a lesson or some sort of intel of like, let me just show you something here quick.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, whatever. It's been my
man.
year of boundaries. Like I did boundaries in November and I was like, duh.
Yeah.
It's been a year.
Accepted.
Wow. I didn't know.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because because what's true is like, and even in my own journey of like, you go and you date and you learn the things and you're like, oh, I've gone to therapy. I've dealt quote unquote with my trauma. I've, done all the things. I feel really good in myself.
Yeah.
And then you go into a relationship, you're like,
ooh.
Oh shit. This is so new. Yes. Because you're not challenged in the space of like, oh, in relationship is where I learned that.
Yeah. I had a client today say the exact same thing. He's like, I didn't know having kids was going to trigger all my shit. I'm like, oh, so no one told you?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, they're going to trigger all your unfinished shit because they're precious and important and they're reflections of you. And so they're going to trigger all your stuff that hasn't been, right?
Yes.
They're great reminders, proxies for stuff that's not
100%.
Yeah.
Right. So I've had a few.
You don't look in the mirror ever, don't have kids.
Oh man. And then also being like, oh, I've had so many clients coming to me like, I'm going to find myself first and then I'm going to do these things and then I'll be ready for a relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
However, understand that when you go into a relationship, there's a whole new self you're going to find.
Yeah.
Because being on your own and in your own bubble feels
Very
amazing.
different.
And then when you start to bring someone in and going, oh, I'm gonna like share this bubble with
Yeah. Holy smokes.
you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so scary.
Different opinions about that.
100%. And if that, again, going back to that safety and security of myself, I know that even when things get jiggly, I have a place that I stand.
Yeah.
And I'm okay.
Yeah.
I can lean back and be curious and go, oh, that's that part getting a little sticky again.
Yeah.
Hey, partner X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
I'm having this feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Either, you know, can we walk through it together? Can you help me there?
Yeah.
Communication.
Can we not?
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Like what's happening?
Yeah.
And that clarity of like, this is what I stand for. And also, I thought this is what I stand for, and now it's getting shifty.
Yeah. It's so important.
Yes.
Yes. So people think of deal breakers as really harsh when you create safety and security, but actually they give structure to it.
Yes.
And they're not solid bricks of concrete. They're moldable. So if I say, yeah, I stood for this thing, or I thought I stood for this thing, but now it's getting shifty or kind of sticky or it's kind of, right, I want to process this with you. So it shows insight that I'm actually paying attention to what's happening in my body in real time, throughout relationship, throughout space and time, right? That I'm, oh, this is actually shifting for me. So can we negotiate this and talk about this again?
Right.
Right. And so having some agreements that we know what we stand for, and we regularly look at those things and ask questions and be curious about, are those the same? Lots of couples will say, and the classic one is like, you know, one of the things that it would be affairs. It's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
And okay, sure enough, that's fine. That's a great deal breaker to have. However, I can tell you 25 years in, I deal with a lot of affair couples that make beautiful relationships post-affair. That it wasn't a deal breaker for them. It was initially,
right?
And then they decided it actually wasn't, so they had to change their agreements.
Yeah, because there's usually something underneath it.
Yes, an affair is usually something else. It's usually symptomatic of what else is going on in the relationship.
Yes,
99.9% of the time.
Yeah, it's a lot of like content.
Yeah, that's going on. So when you go, oh, I actually deal breaker was the affair, but actually I didn't focus on the deal breakers that were all these things that we weren't properly negotiating or taking care of before that thing.
Yes.
Right. So I give negotiation too, like having skillful negotiations is part of relationship. Now there's a caveat there, because I think the person who's the better arguer often can hijack, can bulldoze the person that's the more passive or maybe not as articulate. Right. So you be really mindful of that. If you're in a relationship, it doesn't serve you, it doesn't serve the relationship to bulldoze your partner either. That's going to create resentment later on. It's going to create unsafety later on. So negotiation is really negotiating a win-win, which I know sounds cliche, but this idea of like, I'm going to negotiate why this thing here is good for me and for you from a mindful place of like, actually from your point of view, if I'm like, showing empathy. Yeah. And what I've heard from you, what I know from you, from paying attention to you, this thing of why we should get a dog or whatever where we're negotiating is good for both of us. If I can't do it from that point of view, I need to dig deeper. Right. Right. And negotiation means, if we have different opinions, let's say I want a dog, you don't want a dog. Let's just use that example. One of us is going to have to either give in, right, change our mind. Because there's deal breakers that are like, okay, guess we can't get past that. I want kids, you don't. That could be I love you, but we can't stay together. Yes. But maybe a dog would be negotiable. And so, but negotiating means that it doesn't come back up like a bad lunch later. It's not going to come regurgitate later on. It's going to be like, okay, so if we decide to get this dog, even though, you've maybe, or one of us has maybe, changed their mind or had to like give in a little or to give and take. Is this going to come back and bite us later on? And having skillful dialogue about that of like, are you sure? Are you saying yes when you want to say yes or no when you want to say no? Yes. Are you being really mindful of that? Again, that takes that first piece of like knowing self. Yeah. If I'm going, yeah. And my parts are like, what are you doing? Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
A common question I ask in practice, particularly with people like, how present are you? Is like, are you the person that will take your Starbucks order back if it was made wrong?
Yeah.
And 98
say no. I'm not.
Say no. Absolutely not. They're like, oh, it's fine. I'm like, okay. So in all those times that you have said yes, but you've actually really wanted to say no.
Yeah.
Is a moment where that building of safety and security and sturdiness within yourself
that's a good word,
is cracked just slightly.
Yeah.
And a little bit over time it just erodes.
Because you create defenses of like, it's okay, it's fine. Those are all defenses as to why I'm letting that crack happen.
So if you can't even do it with the lady at Starbucks that you don't even know her first name and it's probably some 16-year-old working for the summer, how are you going to do it with a person that you've built a life with, that there's stickiness or some history, some stuff?
Yeah.
How are you going to go and say that to your partner when you're like, it's fine, I ordered an oat latte, but this black coffee is great.
Yeah.
Right? Like, no, that's not actually how that works.
Yeah.
So if you can do it for yourself first,
or
even recognize maybe you're running late and you're like, I actually don't have time to go in. It's being like, I really wish I could go in, but I can't.
Yeah, that's a start.
That's a start. That's just noticing.
Well, noticing even if I'm on time, noticing that I notice you part and I hear what you're saying. Today's not the day.
Yes.
And what's the reason why? I got to negotiate that I'm not avoiding, or I'm going to do whatever, like having some negotiation of like presence and attunement of like, I hear this part of me. And so then where else today can I have my own back?
Yes. And knowing, again, I think the most important part for me that I learned along the way is that it shifts.
It shifts for sure.
We are not linear.
Yeah.
And when you get into partnership, there actually isn't a place of polarity.
Yeah.
You can have this duality is the most beautiful thing in the world.
Yeah.
I had a client yesterday that talked about how his vision of the world, because of where he works, was like there's so many people of different backgrounds and religion and ethnicity and race that come into one place, and they're all there for the same thing.
Yeah.
And it was the beautiful thing in the world. And I often have talked about that too, of being like, I can be a gay woman and be in a room with someone who doesn't agree with my lifestyle or doesn't agree with how I live the world, but we can work beautifully together and we can learn from one another.
Yeah.
And we go our separate ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
How amazing is that?
Yeah.
So to dumb it down into like a relationship part is like, oh, you can want to get a dog and I don't want to.
Yeah.
And we can live in that space until we're willing to find an area. Yeah. Maybe it's like, actually, it's not that it's not a dog that I don't want.
Yeah.
I don't want a dog the size of a horse.
Yeah. Or I don't want the fur in the house, right? Yeah. So that idea of duality, I think of like mixing the colors together. Like I that visual of like mixing so that's actually the color of life. Nothing's meant to be one or the other. It's meant to be a combination, special relationship with like a piece of you and a piece of me. And maybe there's a bit more like white to your yellow today because I'm getting the dog. Or maybe there's a bit more yellow to my white today, or whatever. What we're wearing today, right? But that we influence each other. Yes. So like John Gottman talked about this, when I took his trainings years ago about the power of influence. And he even said, I can't remember the percentage now, but more than half of our marital conflict will never get resolved. We're going to more than half of it, we're going to disagree on. Yeah. That's the color. That's the color. Like of having those joint colors of like, but we've negotiated that to maybe our yellow and white make a different color of yellow. Like our blue and red make purple. And so I do with couples often, I'll say we'll create like colors and create a mid color. Like we're focused on the purple today. Yeah. So let's focus on that work, how we grow the purple. But that's a color of like the two of us together are going to create this new thing. Right. It's not going to be exact 50-50. That's not a win-win. No. The win-win is negotiation and power of influence and back and forth. And I have your back and I consider the relationship above all. Consider the relationship that we both live in and how are we both going to look at that relationship and go, it needs to win. Yeah. It needs to win no matter what. So how can we both make sure that thing wins? 100%. We both live in there.
Here's a question for you. Oftentimes or in the last little while, I've had individuals come in and say like, well, my relationship has gotten like stale. It's boring. In my I'll tell you my theory on it after you answer, but what is your placement or your opinion on that of being like they've been together for 15 years or a handful of years and like, oh, they're just kind of boring, it's really vanilla.
Yeah. Well, I have a bunch of questions. I'd be like, well, when did you stop dating? Yeah. When did you stop being each other's dates, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, boyfriend, girlfriend. So boring how? Because I look at that picture of like relationship, I'm like, is it boring sexually? Is it boring intellectually? Is it boring spiritually? Is it boring? Like what areas? And I break apart those areas and go, when did you stop attending to those areas? Because the relationship, the thing that you're in, if it's not attended to, it loses color. Yeah. When did you stop contributing each other's color to that thing to make sure it stays colorful? Right. And then we can create all kinds of interventions and ways to color it up. Because welcome to long-term relationship. I tend to think if we're really rocking this part of the relationship, that part's going to get a little gray. Yeah. Because we're focusing so much here. There's so much color in marriage. There's so much color in our career. There's so much color in whatever that, after kids, our sex life goes down the hill sometimes. Because I'm so focused on all my parts is focused on the kid. That's okay. Right. But it doesn't mean we leave it gray for a long period of time. We go, And so being skillful is being like, here's our bubble of our relationship. And let's make sure we're attending to those things on a regular basis, knowing full well that you and I are transparent and agreeing that this part's going to be a little bit neglected for a while. Right. And for how long? Yeah. Maybe this week, maybe this month, right. Maybe this next 6 months because I'm going through chemotherapy. I don't know. Right. I think there's things that we're going to neglect for periods of time that we're well aware of why we're doing that, but it's not long term. Right.
Do you often find, and because this is my experience of the last little while, is that particularly women, not to say this wouldn't be for men, but in my practice right now is women coming in and being like, it's been stale, it's boring, it's vanilla. And then as we get to dig in underneath it is like, oh, because I don't know who I am, I've just followed this like yellow brick road of my partner. So no wonder it's boring.
Because you're boring for yourself.
Yeah. There's no like, oh, I guess I like hiking and I will kayak and do the things. Because I don't want to disagree with my partner. Right. But like
disagreeing is boring. Not disagreeing is boring.
Yeah. So like if I disagree, that's the little spark. That's the flavor, right? Of like, oh, that's okay. We can live in this duality. It feels a little uncomfy.
Well, that's novelty.
Yes.
Like novelty is literally being unknown.
Yes.
Novel. So if I just mesh with you and I become you and I know everything that that's boring. There's no novelty there. Literally intimacy, desire comes from novelty. So I need to see you as an other. That we have a shared bubble and shared vision, things, shared goals, and all these agreements. But I need to use other, and I needed to catch you in your otherness to see novelty.
Yes.
Like, oh, I watch you doing your job, or I watch you doing that thing, or I watch you doing your sport or whatever, and I see you doing this thing that has nothing to do with me, and that's novel to me. That's exciting to me. It's interesting to me.
Yes.
We have to create that long term. If you look for those things long term, and it's doable.
100%. And I think there's a space of like, oh, often in like the younger clients that I've had is like, oh, I get like these big butterflies, or I get this like big swoosh of like feelings.
Yeah.
And me having to like center them down and being like, listen.
Yeah. After about 18 months,
yeah,
the chemicals change.
One, that's going to go away.
Yeah.
And two, it's just, and the best example I can give is like, okay, so maybe you have married couple, vanilla boring. One is having a mismanagement of third or an affair.
Yeah.
Right. And this is so exciting. Well, they give me butterflies and it's so exciting and they just really know me. And it's like, no, they don't. They don't know you.
Because you're not bringing you to the relationship. You're bringing a smidge of, you're bringing like a fingernail.
Yes. This little like
of life. You're not doing,
No.
Yeah.
But also having changed perspective of like, if you just say, let's dumb it down to like sex.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so you're having an affair, you're having sex with this third.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. It's novel. It's all these things. But sex with my married partner, it's boring.
So well, been together for so long, it's boring.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so peel it out. If you take the partners out of it, you're probably having the same sex.
Yeah.
The difference is like that new partner doesn't know you worth nothing.
Yeah.
And it's probably not attuned and it's not flowing. What you feel is like this excitement of somebody new.
Yeah.
But within your marital place of having sex, it's like, oh, it's really safe.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's safe and sturdy and I can actually show up in whatever way.
Yeah.
We can laugh and giggle when things go wrong or someone falls off the bed or we can try something new.
Yeah.
There's this space of opening the door, but we forget that exists.
Yeah.
What we see is like, oh, we just do what we do to get the job done.
Yeah.
There's no curiosity or exploration of this really sturdy, safe foundation you've built.
Yeah.
Over a handful of years.
Yeah.
What we want is that butterfly feeling that we've been taught, particularly as women.
Yeah.
That it's like,
in books and all that.
Yeah. Right. Like, oh, it's the knight in shining armor and he comes down on the white horse and he carries me away.
Yeah.
Like I was proven that wrong wildly, quickly.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, right.
Yeah.
Actually, to feel safe in that environment, that's where we want to lean.
Yeah.
When someone doesn't exhibit all that stuff, right? If I'm like, oh, I have this like attraction to you, I want to be around you, but my whole nervous system feels content. Which
then creates space to do the novelty thing.
Yeah.
Right? It creates a space for it. So the chemical thing is real. Like we know that the chemicals last about 18 months, that's just our animal instincts to procreate and then move on to species. But if you actually, your value is monogamy, you want to do, that's your value of a long-term monogamous relationship, then you have to create that novelty on an ongoing basis. And the great thing is we change as a species all the time.
Yeah.
Right. I can speak for my own body. Like it's done a lot of changing in the past few years. Like all the menopause and all. So I'm having brand new sex that I've never had ever before in my life because my body's changed.
Yes.
Right. The high sex I had when I was 20 is totally different sex than I had when I was 30. Like you're going to learn and you bring that. So if you're not in your own system, aware of your own self and your own sex, your own body, your own desire, right? How can you bring that to the relationship? Again, let's get back to the relationship itself and be like, oh, hey, what's happening in this system of mine?
Yeah.
How is this evolving and changing? How could I then bring that novelty to my partner's body that's changing? Yeah. How we can create newness on a regular basis.
Yeah. Or if I'm not willing to change my Starbucks order, how am I going to say this is how I like something where I'm literally naked and very vulnerable?
Yeah.
Like literally.
I'm not going to do with probably stranger, or maybe I am, but this idea of, because it's interesting because, orgasm literally requires, enough safety, but enough, sympathetic nervous system, which is unsafe, right? To have the experience, to have the erotic experience.
Yes.
So how do I bring that to my relationships? And again, if that's not your jam and you want to do polyamory, then that's different. 100%. Absolutely. But if you're saying I'm in this monogamous relationship that I chose and it's my value, but now I'm bored, but we can fix that.
Yeah.
It's actually not that hard to fix that. But there's underlying stuff of like, oh, actually there's mistrust and misattunement and resentment. So okay, we got to deal with that stuff then first.
Yeah.
And at the same time, at least.
Yeah. And knowing that even if you communicate it, because that's the other thing to think, well, I tell my partner all the time.
Yeah.
I tell them like, oh, okay, well, how? And are they listening?
Are they receiving?
Yeah.
Is it that skillful, articulate communication that they can receive and process in their own space, that they can actually hear you?
Yes.
It's just a skill of like doing this dance. It's like doing a dance. We're doing different dances all the time.
Yeah.
Because we're evolving, growing species.
Right. And that sturdiness comes from, I can have conflict from you, or we can have conflict together. And the moment that's actually really powerful is that repair.
Yeah.
I can communicate what's going on for me. And I'm guilty of it. And I'm sure you have been too. And you're past it being like, oh, we have this conflict, we hit heads. And then it's like, okay.
Yeah.
There's no like the repair is like the disengagement.
Avoidant.
Right? It's like,
yeah.
Okay, it's done.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, actually that
just lingering there.
Yes, that repair part is that like, oh, we can actually co-regulate together and use like both of our nervous systems to be like, okay, whoa.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can disagree with you. I can have my different opinions.
Yes.
And with that, again, there's novelty. There's the, you're a different species. You're a different person than me. You're a different animal. We're the humankind, but we're different animals.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And knowing that that's, again, going back to like self of being like, that's where I stand.
Yeah.
Right. If my value is monogamy, okay, I have to lean there.
Yeah.
And when I want to lean out of that, what's happening?
Yeah.
If leaning out is more comfortable, I will tell you get more uncomfy.
Yeah.
Lean the other way.
Yeah.
Do what feels more uncomfortable.
Yeah. To grow, to learn.
To grow and evolve and to learn.
Yeah.
Because the easy way, and I'm guilty of it too, is like it's easier to run.
Right.
It's easier to pack my shit and go.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate because, you know, we know the stats. Like the stats are like more than 50% of males just fail, right? Because there's a business and there's and again, I'm of the, you know, the opinion that if it's not growing, it's not healthy, then don't be there. Like if it's unhealthy, you know, absolutely don't be there. But what is unhealthy? And what can we grow? What can we evolve? What can we work at? What can we continue to build? Even though it feels uncomfortable, it feels, you know, boring. It feels people leave for two simple reasons all the times. And then they just go repeat that pattern because second marriages have a higher percentage of failure chance. And third, they stats just continue. So if you think I'm going to the next one, it's going to get better unless you've done your work. That one's going to repeat times quicker, actually.
Yes, and knowing that
science.
Yes, and knowing that your therapist, so like we've had this a couple times too, and we've talked about it in consult, of being like, we're not going to give you the answer.
Yeah. I'm going to give you the answer of like, what's going to create secure functioning?
Yes.
That's it. That's my goal. My first and foremost goal is what creates secure functioning.
Yeah.
And you create your own rules. I don't care what your rules are. As long as the people in the relationship agree that those are the shared rules.
Yeah. And that at any time, and I've heard you say being like, I will tell you if I don't believe this is a safe and secure relationship. And then I will say, I will not advocate for that.
No, I will not advocate for insecurity.
But if you come to me as an individual and you say like, what do I do?
Yeah.
What happens? It's like, that's not having sense of self.
Yeah.
Because if you go and make that decision, or if I say, yes, leave them. Yeah. Yes, go, don't do it. Go to Polly, do whatever. If I just gave you advice in my opinion all the time.
It's my opinion, not yours.
Exactly.
Not self.
That's not self.
Yeah.
So my job is to get you rooted in that and to say like, okay, actually when I make the decision, whether as your therapist I agree with it or not.
Yeah. As long as it's safe and secure.
100%.
So if you come in and you're going to advocate for unsafe and secure, I'm going to tell you, no, find a new therapist. That's not what I advocate for. And I won't promote that. Yeah. It's not good for you or anybody in your community, your children, your environment. It's not good for anybody. Yeah. It creates tons of other things.
Right.
Yeah.
And finding that, again, I like the word sturdy because I think it gives you some like flow of like, I am sturdy, but sometimes I can wobble.
Yeah.
Right. Like I can go
the
like
trees bend in the wind.
Yes.
It's adapt and
right.
Life is improv, a lot of improv in our life.
100%. So when I get really sturdy, and the hardest work I ever did was having to dig into the values that I have and get really clear on what they actually mean. Yeah. So I like being in a committed relationship. Okay. At one point or time, it was hard for me to want to be loyal because of confliction in my sexual orientation. So it was like, okay, am I actually monogamous or do I want an open relationship? Oh, no, that's not for me. Okay. Lean here. Yeah. That's the definition for me. Yeah. Or common times I have, family's a big one that come up. So particularly around here, family's a core value of mine. I'm like, okay, tell me about your family. And they're people who are judgmental or they have lots of things to say. They're, umbrella term again is like controlling, quote unquote. They're really entrenched or enmeshed in my life. But family's really important. Yeah. And I'm like, okay.
So what values are those?
So what are those? Yeah. Right. And it's like, oh, I actually don't get to show up as my sturdy self when I'm around this family.
Yeah. So then you're actually not aligning.
You're not aligning. Yeah. So family might actually be these chosen people. Yeah. They actually might be, oh, family to me is the people that have my back, that say good things. Yes, 100%. So they're these people,
challenge me.
Yes, they are these people, and they might not actually come from the same last name or the same bloodline. Yeah, they're actually like, oh, what is family? Yeah. Maybe that's not a core value of mine, and that's okay. Yeah, yeah, and maybe family is the ones you're born into are to evolve. Like you chose this life to evolve from that place to change patterns and to change, trajectories and to plant seeds of hope and love, and there's nothing bad. Yeah. You could look at your family and be like, oh, I'm going to put a boundary up there. Doesn't mean I don't still love them, wish them well.
It means that they don't align with me. They don't like my values. And that's okay. I will love them where they're at, accept them where they're at.
Yeah.
And I'm going to plant seeds of my values in where I align,
Yeah.
which is my chosen family.
And how much, better or more present you can be in that relationship when you're like, oh, I actually understand that we are misaligned in this spot. And I'm okay with that. You just go to, on our dartboard, you're one more ring out.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I hate you
No,
or I don't
ready to
like you as
change you. I
much.
need to fix you. Like, no, I can accept you exactly where you are. I see you, which is huge. I see you.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
We're cool here.
Yeah.
And then we actually get to have this like really nice like vibrato between our relationship that moves and moves with who we are.
Yeah. And I have boundaries of what I will
Yes.
share because you're a couple rings out of my dartboard. I don't share these things with you because we don't align there, so it would make no sense to.
Yes.
But I share other things that are out there, they're aligned, with like more general items and
100%.
things. Yeah.
And as we get to know ourselves, and family that's why I brought it up, was a big one for me in the dating world. It was like family is a core value of mine. I'm close with my family. It was a big thing. I want family, I want kids, all the things. So when I started dating, I was like, I need someone that's really tuned into family. And as I went through my whole gambit of, therapy and all the things, it was like, oh, what did I miss from my past relationships? What were the red flags I kind of let go of? And it was like, oh, they had a different relationship or not a strong relationship with their family. It's like, oh, okay. So as I started dating, my family's a core value. And I'm like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Family can look really different.
Yeah.
So family for me ended up looking in my partner was like, family to her means I want a family. I wanted to reparent my kind of gross, messy past with my own family to create something sturdy and strong.
Yeah.
That says family to me is the people we love and we care about.
Yeah.
And then that's what shifted. So even outside of relationship, family had a different value definition. And then I got into relationship, was like, oh, universe, I see you.
Yeah.
Cool trick.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that word, and then you redefine it again. Welcome to evolution. Yeah.
Right. So it'll continue to happen as you get it to, and people start to push.
Absolutely.
And that was a space of negotiation.
Yeah.
Right. Like that was between me and my partner, was like, oh, family for you looks like this, but family looks like this for me.
Yeah.
But where are we in common?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then can we redefine that value for us? So I got my opinion, you can have your opinion, you're different. And then what's the value for our relationship? We say family now, that's our bubble in our relationship. What does that word mean to us in our relationship now? So you create your own, it's so important to create your own definitions.
Yes.
It really is.
Yeah.
With every value, with every word that you say is a core value, go back to those words as a partnership and be like, what does that mean to us? And then what are our rules, our agreements? So around respect, around family, around whatever, right? All the things, like, what are you and I going to do to protect the safety and security around our values in our relationship? That's different than our neighbors, than our parents, or than our friends. That's between you and I.
And it actually can be like almost like business. Like I laugh now.
Yeah.
Meg will be like, I'll be ranting about something and she'll say like, oh, that's your integrity button. Like, because we've talked about it. And she's like, there's a lot of me that it works from a place of integrity and ethics. They're big for me.
Yeah.
So when someone pushes up against that button, I'm like, ugh, and that's like where I vibrate really high. And like, I'm usually pretty like have really slow flow. And she's the high vibrate.
Yeah.
And she was like, whoop, that's that button. Right. And she'll know that. But we've had a conversation about what are your core values? What do they look like?
Yeah.
I remember hearing you in a session being like, oh, you guys are speaking two different languages.
Yeah.
And often we do.
Often
I don't have the same language as my partner,
Yeah.
but as we come together being like, oh, actually, this is what I mean by that. And having the courage and the kind of presence to say, oh, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Can you try again?
Yeah.
Is this what you meant?
Yeah. And let's dig at it and discuss it after we actually define it for each other.
Yes.
So that, because that's attunement, right? That's the piece I
Mhm.
said, if you, nothing else would say, listen to that word of attunement or paying attention. That I'm going to pay so close attention to you and to your trigger, whatever the things that happen in your body, go, okay, so when this happens or that's being said or this rubbed up against you, for you, that means this.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm paying close attention to you.
Yeah.
And vice versa. And it goes, because I want you to be the expert on me, not to be the expert on you. If we're going to be in a close relationship, I want us to be the experts on each other, to be like, if I had to hand you off to the AI to babysit you for the rest of your life, I would give them the manual, like, okay, she likes this, she doesn't like this, put her to bed at this time, these are her foods, these are her triggers, these are her provides. Like, I want to be able to hand off the manual that I can write about you, because it creates such a safety and security system.
Yeah.
And it takes years. It's a lifetime, actually.
100%.
Because again, we evolve and change.
Yes.
Which actually creates novelty like that. People think I think that's the best part of it. And here's the thing I want to say too, just to end maybe, is that it sounds like a lot of work. And at the beginning it can be. I think if you go into a relationship knowing we're going to create something here, we're going to build a house. It's going to take a bit of work to really like lay out the foundation, make sure it's solid and secure, like make sure it's reinforced with some rebar and some good concrete, all this stuff, right? We're not just going to design the shutter and the kitchen table. That's, the fluff that looks really pretty, but doesn't actually create the I'm going to do the foundation really well. Then we build up the stuff, right? The stuff, the friendship and the shared values. We build up the stuff, but I can renovate the house all the time. I can renovate, what aligns and my shared dreams and goals. I can renovate those things, but that foundation needs to be solid. And I need to be looking at that foundation for cracks on a regular basis, like a yearly basis. What I say in my relationship, like we're looking at those things, like where are we in our foundation? What feels secure? And then the fluff is, so if we do it well and we do it skillfully, I think relationships are easy. Like I'd say mine is pretty easy. Like it's not like I don't have to work very hard in a relationship because we've got a really solid foundation and we do daily little things to maintain it so that it becomes easy and better. Like I say to my kids all the time, I am more in love today and in a better relationship today than I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I thought I was great when we got married. I was like, I was so happy and lovey. I'm way more in love than I was then. 22 years later.
And there's a space of like, and for me and how I define it now in my partnership is like, I have always been terrified of conflict. Always. It always scared me. It was like I was going to lose my lid, or, I'm Irish descent, so there's a lot of firing back there. So I think for me, I worked really hard to like not be that angry person, and I dated people that brought that out. So conflict was a scary place for me. In my marriage now, have been in a place of like, oh, I can disagree with you. And I'm not scared you're going to bail on me. Or I'm not scared I'm going to be like, see you.
Like, we don't threaten the relationship.
No.
Huge rule.
I said this to you yesterday, it was a joke. And when Megan and I got married, I jokingly, because God love JC, did like a beautiful thing. Like literally our makeup was so beautiful and it looked so good. And we're getting to do the cake part. And I'm like, if you smash this in my face,
my pretty makeup,
divorce. And it's on tape and I wish I can find it. And she laughed and she's like, we don't threaten the relationship. I was like, it was a joke.
Not funny.
I laughed and I was like, okay, right, not funny.
Right.
So even in moments like that, of being like, right. Like,
yes, we have deal breakers.
Yeah.
We should discuss. We know what those are, right? And we don't threaten relationships. So it's not like those things don't threaten. I don't think it's funny to threaten ever, because to create safety means this is the life raft that you and I have built together. I'm going to live in and here's the thing. It's conditional. I want to say like the only unconditional probably relationship is probably with your kids for most parents, I would say. But for our primary relationship, like our adult relationships, it's conditional. So what are the conditions need to be met for it to be safe and secure long-term? That's the rules we're going to create. And that might sound not romantic, but it's just true. Relationships are conditional. Long-term relationships, primary relationships are conditional in the adult world, because if there was no conditions, we stand for nothing, and that's unsafe. So what are the conditions we're going to create long-term to make those things, and not threatening those things, knowing what those agreements are, know what they are. So I'm not going to threaten the relationship because we don't align or don't agree on something. We don't do that to each other. We say, I disagree with you strongly in this container of safety. So we can have a really good conflict discussion. We can have passionate discussions about disagreeing about things, about getting a dog, whatever the thing is, and we're safe enough to do that thing.
Yes. And if there's no space of like, hey, we're not moving, or things aren't shifting, or it's not going somewhere, take a break. It's actually okay to step away and say like, hey, this isn't going anywhere. I'm feeling really heightened. I'm going to go take a lap, or, maybe it's go listen to music, or have 30 seconds or 10 minutes or 2 hours, however long it is, to say, let's bring things down. So we can come back together. Yes. So that relationship itself is the number one thing.
Huge.
Right? Like to say, like, if I can go back there to say, I'm a little, this is jiggly or shaky. What's happening in here? I'm not content, or I'm not in that really calm state.
Like, what is that really? What's happening for me? The thing that they're triggering, that the environment is triggering in me, is that something that I'm willing to die on? Is that the hill I want to die on?
Yes.
Or is it something that feels really passionate now because it's been a threat since I was a kid, or a threat from this other thing, or it feels unsafe because of, can I unpack that and go, oh, it's actually this other thing that I can now discuss with you? Or is it a deal breaker? And then a deal breaker doesn't mean we break up.
No.
Deal breaker means this is really important to me. How can we negotiate this? Right? How can, you started using drugs, and we said at the beginning we won't use drugs. I could use that example, actually. I could, my husband and I, that's one of our agreements. We don't use drugs. But then last year, I wanted to do a plant medicine journey. So I could be like, hey, we need to renegotiate this, like, no drug thing. And he was like, well, obviously, I was like, well, no, like, it's still drugs. Like, it's psilocybin, still drugs. So I'm going to do this thing. And I'm going to do a big dose. And like, I want you to be there. And like, he was like rolling his eyes. I'm like, but it's still negotiation of like, I actually want to bring drugs into our relationship now. How are we going to navigate that? However, what's the safety and containment around that thing? And knowing that parts of yourself, again, will get triggered in relationship that haven't been there. My history of trauma back in my early teens, did all the work and did EMDR and really dug into therapy, and then all of a sudden you get into relationship. And it's like, oh, here, that silver platter of all the things that you thought you dealt with are now in different flavors and contexts of things. And then also knowing that if we don't pay attention to it, they stack. Yes.
Right. So how many times have like even irritated with Jay, or like I'm irritated with Meg, and I'm watching everything that she's doing. And I'm like, and the way that you drink your water and how you close that cover
on TV.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be right now.
How dare you?
How dare you cut the grass right now? Because I was supposed,
right. Yeah. And they're like, are you good?
No.
And it's like, oh, okay. And it's from 24 hours before when I said my opinion about X, Y, or Z.
Just missed me or
100%. So if we get to a place of like, oh, when I can speak clearly about something, or if my partner goes, hey, what's wrong? Stop saying I'm fine.
I'm fine. Or I'm just mad about this thing right now.
Yeah, I'm having a minute.
Because you're watching the game. Is it really about the game? Is it really about the thing? Let me just unpack. If I can do with you, great. I'm not skillful yet. I'm gonna pause and go, I'm gonna unpack that for a second and go, okay. And even like I'm visual, I'll write it down like, okay, there's the game, there's the thing that, oh, I'm actually mad because I didn't sleep last night because you came in late. Oh, or because yesterday morning. I could go back and be like, oh, where did this really start that I wasn't honest with you?
Okay, where was the trip up?
Yeah.
Which usually is like a little like pebble you stepped your toe on.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, right. This isn't this big thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes with, again, going back to that trauma piece, is like, oh, I can have moments where my bubble or my, what you call like a window of tolerance gets really tight. And sometimes it's really far.
Yeah.
And then knowing like, oh, when I get irritated with Meg, when she does this, I get really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. So one is like hovering over top of me and I'm like, oh, she'll come. She just wants to love me. She wants to give me a kiss and say hi and I miss you today. And it's so cute. And I am like rigid.
Yeah.
Everything in me is like, and then her parts go rejection.
Yeah.
Right. And she wants to flee.
Yeah.
But if I didn't know what that was, and there was a time I didn't, that it becomes rigid. And then maybe I do engage. I give her a kiss and it's rigid and it's awkward. And then later we want to engage in something else intimate. And I feel, because of my trauma, I'm like, no, thank you.
And because you gave in without being honest with yourself. So then it's fine. And then you abandon self. And it's actually not fine. You're like, it's fine. And you give in to that physical effect or whatever that thing is that you're doing. And your parts are like, well, she should not listen to us. And so now you're creating mistrust in yourself. You're creating misalignment in yourself to give into that thing for you. And I do that 10,000 times and I don't trust you. But actually, it wasn't about you. It was about not aligning with myself and giving myself a voice.
100%.
And now I'm totally, discombobulated in my own system again because I didn't listen to myself and abandoned myself.
And then you're angry with your partner when it's like, actually, I'm not angry with you at all.
I
Maybe I have some unsettled shit that like, hey, instead of coming over top of me, can you sit beside me?
Yeah.
And it's going to be really uncomfortable for both of us.
Yeah.
And I don't say I'm fine. I say, I'm okay. I'm just really uncomfortable.
Yeah. I'm going to sit in it for a second and figure what this is. I'm going to sit in here and give it space so I can listen to what's happening in my body right now in real time.
And then that part of me that gets to sit with her goes, oh, this is a corrective experience.
Yeah.
She's not scary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I can feel really, and this is scary and this is something bad is going to happen. That's that part showing up for me, that anxiety gremlin. And then she sits beside me and we sit there and she says, I love you and I miss you today. And she gives me a kiss.
And the gremlin's like, what?
Yeah. And it turns into like a little squeaker toy. And she's like, okay. And waddles away.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
yes. And then those gremlins, right, to use your word, go, exactly. They go, oh, so what I thought, like my anxiety, my Amy's like, but I thought it was doing this. And you're like, I know you did. So let's just sit here in real time, bring it to the here and now experience, the corrective experience. We can heal in relationship when we do it well. And it's like, oh, so she's not going to bite me, or she's not going to hit me, or she's not going to abandon me, or she's not going to belittle me. Oh, so the next time it's a little bit less rigid.
Yes.
And a little bit less of it. And over time it's like, oh, I actually crave her because she's my safe space now.
Yes.
And so maybe I'm triggered by my dad or my teacher, whatever that thing actually was, not by my partner, because they've corrected it. And now I've created resiliency to those other things.
Yes.
Because here and now I'm safe. Now my parts, my internal little Amy's are like, oh, I trust you and I trust her. So now I've got a team of us.
Yes.
I feel way more resourced I've ever felt.
And if there wasn't that attunement to self, that same feeling that I got when she's over top of me actually aligns with the same thing of like when I feel excited or when I feel anxious. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
If I leaned there and be like, oh, I'm getting all these butterflies. Actually, I'm responding to threat.
Yeah.
I'm pushing it down and going, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Right. And even when I work with athletes, right? Like I'm so anxious. I'm blah, blah, blah. I go, are you anxious or are you excited?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can't tell the
bubbles.
difference.
Yeah.
The same bubbles, right? So taking that second to go, actually, when this happens, that's fear.
Yeah.
I'm scared.
Yeah.
Right. How many times when I was dating and single and I've had an interaction like, ooh, fun.
Yeah.
Same feeling. It's actually like, oh, I'm terrified. Or hey, this isn't aligning.
Yeah.
This isn't you.
And to know those little differences, people don't know the differences.
Right. So I think our job is, for me anyways, a therapist, whether it's working with sports performance or with an individual, saying, let's tell the difference.
Yeah.
so that you can lean into probably the one that feels excited
Yeah.
is scarier to lean to, because we often find the anxiety one a lot easier to plow into.
Yeah.
Yeah. We join the
We can
scary.
react there.
Yeah, that feels better.
Yeah.
Excitement's like, well, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Just be excited.
Yeah. Notice it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
Let it fuel you if you want.
Yeah.
All kinds of options.
100%, right? But having that place of just notice.
Yeah.
And it feels really big and scary to like, we talk about it so fluently now as like being as clinicians being like, oh, you just notice what comes up for you.
Yeah. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, no, that's hard.
It is hard. Yeah.
Right. And I had a client
And
yesterday.
it feels yucky sometimes. Like, I don't want to notice. I want to shove in a box. I don't want to
Yeah.
notice that feeling. Well, yeah.
Yeah. So creating for me, I had a client yesterday ask me, how do you create that sturdiness? Like,
Yeah.
how do I just know I'm present? And, unbeknownst to him, he's incredibly self-aware, but he feels like he's not doing it right, quote unquote. There's no right or wrong.
No.
But if you feel like you struggle in that space, I said, just notice when you go to grab a coffee cup out of the cupboard. What does the handle feel like your hands? What is like, just be present, just like in a second, whether that's your driving.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I feel the sun on my face. That feels really nice.
Yeah. Well, senses, that's a good place to start, right? If you've ever been
100%.
present before, just start with your 5 senses.
Mhm.
Like right now, do a sensory input assessment. Be like, what am I noticing in my senses?
Yes.
Can I hear? What can I smell? What can I taste? Like all the senses. What can I just pause and notice those things? And then once you kind of learn that practice to become internally, focused, it's a little easier.
Yes.
Like, oh, what's my heart rate doing? My breathing doing?
Right.
Right. What's my curiosity? Then you can start to like do the other parts of self, as you layer them.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think so for many people watching, probably they're going, oh, that sounds brilliant, or it sounds really good, or man, that sounds really scary.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work. It's just like that. Again, I've talked about it before, is like stacking. It's that 1% of like, it's not going to change all tomorrow. But if I can notice for like 10 seconds today, it's better than I did yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Like
10% more insightful.
Yes. Just start there being like, how can I get more connected to my body?
Yeah.
And then you can go on to the big sticky stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because starting there, then you can teach those that your relationship with about who you are.
Yes.
And then over time they can pay attention to you and then teach you back. That's where repair and healing and growth really happens. Yeah. So
Big
rules today. Big lessons. These are big lessons. But
big lessons.
Complex, but if you could take away from today, it's attunement to self, paying attention to self first, and then bringing that attunement, that awareness to your primary relationships, and then having the dartboard visual of like, who's earned the right to be in that sacred space. It's an earned space. It's a sacred space. And everyone gets to live there. Like very few get to live there.
Mm-hmm.
And
your circle should be small.
Should be small. It's a dartboard for you. Like it's small in the middle for a reason. It gets wider as it gets outward. Yeah. Yeah.
And knowing that, like, I jokingly will say, like, your partner, the love of your life, the only person that has telepathy is you to yourself. That is it.
Yeah.
Your partner does not have that.
No.
That didn't just happen.
Teach them about you.
Yes, you have to teach them.
Yeah. Which is actually, again, novel.
Yes.
Right? Paying attention, asking, and also learning, asking your partner and catching them. Like I really like catching my partner, I tell this to my couples too, in a novel situation.
Mm-hmm.
Watching them parent, again, we're, parenting, or as we're growing age, we're changing. You're never in the same river twice. That metaphor for life, right? Same thing. You're never having the same day twice. So watching your partner do that thing that they've done 1,000 times differently today than they did yesterday. That's novel. Watching them parent that kid who's a different age today, or watching them do their job different today because they've learned some new skills today. There's this most subtle moment you can pause and find novelty to be like, oh, interesting.
Right.
That's cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Finding that connection more often than not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
like,
like,
do it self first.
Yes, 100%.
First.
And we talk like rituals and routines and all the things make that life can feel mundane sometimes. You get up, you do the same things, you go to work, do whatever. Yeah. But it's that pause. Yeah. That like minding the gap of like, when can I take a breath to just be curious about,
yeah.
How do
we
I
do the
operate?
mundane though. We do the mundane to in the space then create the novelty, create the curiosity. Right. The mundane's the structure. You go to work to pay the bills. To do what? To play for life. Yeah. To taste food. Yeah. To taste drinks. To do life. Yeah. So we do those things.
It's like a gas tank.
Relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like
do the mundane. So on the inside we have all the flavors, all the colors.
100%.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
Well, thanks.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks so much for joining us.
We're really glad you're here with us on this journey.
The best way to support this podcast is to subscribe and give it a 5-star review.
See you next time.
This has been a Bread Dog Studios production.